The mop squeaked against the polished concrete floor of Hangar 7, its rhythmic sound barely audible over the distant hum of aircraft engines. Elena Vasquez pushed the bucket forward another few feet, her weathered hands gripping the handle with practiced efficiency. To the soldiers and officers who occasionally passed through this section of Blackwater Air Force Base, she was just another piece of the background, as invisible as the security cameras, mounted in the corners or the fire extinguishers bolted. To the walls, that invisibility had kept her alive for 3 years. She paused near a cluster of metal filing cabinets, pretending to wring out her mop while her eyes swept the hangar's interior. The evening shift was quieter than the day rotation, with only a skeleton crew of mechanics working on the F-35 Lightning II fighters parked in neat rows. Their voices echoed in the cavernous space, discussing technical specifications and maintenance. Schedules in the casual shorthand of people who worked with million-dollar death machines every day. Elena's fingers found the small device clipped inside her cleaning cart, hidden beneath a stack of industrial paper towels. The encrypted recorder was no bigger than a thumb drive, but it had been documenting every conversation, every meeting, every careless comment made within its range for the past 18 months. The intelligence it contained could prevent a war if she could get it to the right people. A sharp whistle cut through the hangar's ambient noise. Elena looked up to see Sergeant Myers approaching, his combat boots clicking against the floor with military precision. She'd learned to read the body language of every person on this base, and Myers carried himself with the particular swagger of someone who enjoyed having power over people he considered beneath him. "Vasquez," he called out, his voice carrying the tone of someone addressing a disobedient dog. "You missed a spot near Bay 3 yesterday." Colonel Harrison noticed it during his inspection. Elena kept her expression neutral, the same mildly apologetic look she'd perfected over years of service. "Work. I'm sorry, Sergeant. I'll make sure to double-check that area tonight." Myers stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath and see the small scar above his left eyebrow. "See what you do. We can't have the base looking like some third world." He never finished the sentence. The lights went out. That emergency lighting flickered on a moment later, bathing the hangar in an eerie red glow. The constant hum of electrical systems died, replaced by the whine of backup generators kicking in. Somewhere in the distance, an alarm began to sound, not the routine test signal Elena had grown accustomed to, but the sharp, urgent wail that meant something had gone very wrong. Myers grabbed his radio. "Control, this is Hangar 7. We've lost primary power." "What's your status?" Static crackled from the device. Then a voice, tense and professional. "All units, we have a base-wide blackout. Possible cyber-attack in progress. Initiate lockdown protocol immediately." Elena's blood turned to ice. She knew exactly what this was, because she'd been watching the preparations for weeks. The conversations she'd overheard, the unusual equipment shipments, the late-night meetings in the restricted sections of the base, it all pointed to tonight. Foreign operatives had finally made their move, and they were using the cover of a manufactured power outage to infiltrate critical systems, but they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed that a middle-aged Latina, woman with a mop and bucket, was exactly what she appeared to be. Elena Vasquez had spent 15 years as a deep cover intelligence operative for the CIA before officially retiring to take a civilian contractor position at Blackwater. Her handler had needed someone who could blend into the background while monitoring potential security breaches at one of the Air Force's most sensitive installations. Someone the real threats would never see coming. Tonight, that patience was about to pay off. Myers was still barking into his radio when Elena made her decision. She grabbed the recorder from her cart and slipped it into her pocket, then pulled out what appeared to be a standard-issue smartphone. Her fingers moved across the screen in a complex pattern that would have looked like nervous texting to any casual observer. In reality, She was activating a hardened communication system that would punch through whatever jamming technology the attackers were using. The message she sent was brief: Blackwater compromised. Package ready for extraction. Activate Phoenix protocol. Myers spun around, finally noticing that his cleaning lady was still standing there, instead of cowering in fear like a proper civilian. Vasquez, get to the emergency shelter. This isn't a drill. She nodded obediently, but instead of heading toward the designated civilian shelter, Elena began moving deeper into the hangar. She had work to do, and for the first time in 3 years, she didn't have to pretend to be someone else. The attackers thought they were dealing with an unprepared military installation caught off guard by a sophisticated cyber assault. They were about to learn that Blackwater Air Force Base had been watched over by a guardian angel who'd been mopping floors and emptying trash cans. While planning for exactly this scenario, Elena smiled grimly as she disappeared into the shadows between the aircraft. Let them come. She'd been ready for this fight her entire career. 23 minutes after the lights went out, Elena had confirmed her worst fears. The attack wasn't just a cyber intrusion, it was a full-scale infiltration designed to cripple America's most advanced fighter program. From her position in the ventilation system above Hangar 7, she watched as 6 figures in tactical gear moved between the aircraft with practiced efficiency. They weren't there to steal planes. They were there to plant something that would turn the F-35s into flying bombs the moment they took off. Her earpiece crackled with static before a familiar voice came through clearly. "Phoenix, this is Control. Package received. What's your situation?" Elena adjusted her position on the narrow maintenance walkway, careful not to make any sound that might alert the infiltrators below. 6 hostiles in Hangar 7, possibly more. Throughout the facility, they're placing devices on the aircraft looks like remote detonation systems. This is designed to look like mechanical failures during flight operations. Understood. Phoenix protocol is active. What do you need? Elena had hoped she'd never hear those words. Phoenix protocol meant that her cover was officially blown, and that the situation was dire enough to warrant bringing a ghost operative back from the dead. But it also meant she finally had backup and resources. I need base security to think there's a gas leak in Section C. Clear everyone out of the maintenance areas, but don't trigger a general evacuation. These people are professionals. If they think they've been made, they'll accelerate their timeline. Copy that. Gas leak reported in Section C. Emergency crews are responding. What else? Elena pulled a small pair of military-grade binoculars from her utility belt, standard equipment for a custodian, if anyone had bothered to look closely at her gear over the past 3 years. Through them, she could see the devices being attached to the aircraft more clearly. Sophisticated electronics packages, probably designed to interfere with the plane's fly-by-wire systems at crucial moments. I count at least 12 aircraft compromised. The devices look like they're on a timer system, probably set to activate during the morning flight operations. If those pilots take off tomorrow, they're dead. One of the figures below suddenly stopped and tilted his head, as if listening to something. Elena held her breath as he reached up and tapped what looked like a small earpiece. After a moment, he gestured to his team, and they began moving more quickly. Control, they just got new orders. Something spooked them. Phoenix, we may have a problem. Satellite imagery shows 3 vehicles approaching the base perimeter from the east. Looks like an extraction team. Elena's mind raced. If the infiltrators were being extracted early, it meant they either had what they came for, or something had gone wrong with their operation. Either way, they wouldn't leave behind evidence, which meant they were about to destroy everything they'd touched, possibly including the aircraft and anyone unlucky enough to be nearby. I'm going to intercept, she whispered into her microphone. Negative, Phoenix. Wait for backup. There's no time. Elena was already moving, using skills she'd honed in some of the world's most dangerous places. The maintenance walkways in military. Hangars were designed for access, not stealth, but she'd spent 3 years learning every inch of this facility. She knew which metal plates would creak under pressure and which support beams could bear her weight. Without so much as a whisper of sound, she dropped silently into the shadows behind a tool cabinet, 30 feet from the nearest infiltrator. Her cleaning cart was still where she'd left it, innocuous and ignored. But hidden in its specially modified compartments were tools that had nothing to do with janitorial work. The magnetic lock on the cart's bottom panel responded to a specific pattern tapped on its surface. Inside, nestled between spare cleaning supplies, was equipment that would have impressed even veteran Special Forces operatives. Elena selected what she needed: a tactical knife, a compact pistol, and 3 small devices that looked like smoke. Grenades, but were actually something much more sophisticated. The first infiltrator went down without a sound. Elena's knife found the gap between his body armor plates with surgical precision, and she lowered his unconscious form behind an aircraft landing gear. The second man was taken out by a sleeper. Hold applied from behind as he bent to examine his work on an F-35's electronics bay, but the third one saw her coming. "Contact!" he shouted, raising his rifle. Elena was already moving, rolling behind the aircraft's engine housing as automatic weapons fire erupted in the hangar. Bullets sparked off metal surfaces and shattered against concrete, the sound deafening. In the enclosed space, "All teams, abort and extract." The leader's voice carried over the gunfire. "Sight is compromised." Elena activated one of her special devices and rolled it across the floor toward the center of the group. It wasn't a smoke grenade, it was a directed electromagnetic pulse generator, designed to disable electronics within a 20-foot radius. The infiltrators' equipment went dead instantly: their night vision goggles, their communications gear, and most importantly, the remote detonators for the devices they'd placed on the aircraft. What do you think will happen next? Share your predictions in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more thrilling stories. The electromagnetic pulse plunged the hangar into even deeper chaos. Emergency lighting flickered as its circuits struggled to compensate for the electronic interference, creating a strobing effect that turned the vast space into a nightmare landscape of shadows and harsh red light. Elena used the confusion to her advantage, moving between the aircraft like a ghost. She'd counted 6 infiltrators initially, but now she could hear at least 8 voices calling to each other in what sounded like Russian. The extraction team had arrived faster than expected, and they were coordinating a fighting retreat toward the hangar's main entrance. "Phoenix, this is Control. We're tracking multiple breaches around the base perimeter. This is bigger than we thought." Elena pressed herself against the cold metal of an F-35's fuselage, trying to control her breathing while she processed this information. A multi-vector attack meant this wasn't just about the fighter program. Someone was after something much bigger. "Control, I need you to run the serial numbers on these aircraft. Cross-reference them with any special modifications or experimental systems. Working on it now." Elena's tactical training kicked in as she heard footsteps approaching her position. 2 infiltrators were moving in a coordinated sweep pattern, using professional clearing techniques that confirmed her suspicion that these weren't ordinary terrorists or foreign agents. They moved like elite military operators. She waited until the first man passed her hiding spot, then struck. Her tactical knife penetrated the small gap between his helmet and body armor, delivering a precise blow that severed his spinal cord. He dropped instantly, his weapon clattering against the concrete floor. His partner spun toward the sound, but Elena was already moving. She came up behind him in a crouch, her compact pistol finding the weak point in his armor. The suppressed gunshot was barely audible over the ongoing chaos. 8 down, 6 to go, she whispered into her microphone. "Phoenix, negative. Satellite thermal imaging shows 14 heat signatures in your area. Elena's blood ran cold. That meant there were more hostiles than she'd initially counted, and they were closing in on her position. But it also meant her electronic warfare device had done its job. The signals from the aircraft-mounted explosives had gone dead, buying them time. A new voice crackled through her earpiece, older and with the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "Phoenix, this is General Morrison. I'm taking direct command of this operation." "What's your assessment of the threat?" Elena recognized the name. Morrison was the base commander, a decorated veteran who'd earned his stars in Iraq and Afghanistan. If he was personally taking control, the situation was even worse than she'd thought. "General, they're after something specific. This isn't a random sabotage operation." They knew exactly which aircraft to target, and they had the sophisticated equipment to bypass our security systems. "Copy that." "Phoenix, I need you to know that 3 of those aircraft were carrying classified prototype systems. Systems that could change the balance of power if they fell into the wrong hands." The pieces suddenly clicked into place in Elena's mind. The late-night deliveries she'd observed, the unusual security protocols around certain aircraft, the conversations she'd overheard about special packages. Blackwater wasn't just home to standard F-35s. It was testing next-generation technology that wouldn't see public acknowledgement for years. "General, they're not trying to steal the aircraft. They're trying to steal the data from the prototype systems." "Affirmative. And Phoenix, if they succeed, we'll lose our tactical advantage over near-peer adversaries for the next decade." Elena understood the implications. China, Russia, and other nations were desperately trying to match American air superiority. The technology being tested at Blackwater could represent a generational leap in fighter aircraft capability, but something still didn't add up. "General, if they wanted the data, why plant the explosives? Why not just extract the electronics?" There was a pause before Morrison's voice returned, heavier than before. "Because they don't just want our technology, Phoenix. They want to destroy our ability to use it. Every pilot scheduled to fly those aircraft tomorrow is one of our top test pilots. We'd lose years of institutional knowledge along with the aircraft." Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the hangar's temperature. This wasn't just an attack on American military technology. It was a calculated strike against the people who understood how to use it most effectively. "Control, I need the pilot roster for tomorrow's flight operations. Transmitting now." The names that appeared on her device screen confirmed her worst fears. The 12 pilots scheduled to fly the compromised aircraft included some of the most experienced test pilots in the Air Force, along with several foreign exchange officers from allied nations. Their deaths would cripple multiple nations' advanced fighter programs. "General, this is an assassination mission disguised as a technology theft. They're targeting our people, not just our equipment." "Understood, Phoenix. All the more reason to stop them. What do you need?" Elena was already moving toward the hangar's control room, where the attackers seemed to be concentrating their efforts. If they were after data from the prototype systems, they'd need access to the hangar's computer networks. "I need you to isolate this facility from all external networks immediately. Cut every connection except for this secure channel." "Done. The base is now electronically isolated." Elena smiled grimly. If the infiltrators couldn't transmit their stolen data, they'd have to extract it physically. That meant they'd have to come through her to get out. She reached the control room door and pressed her ear against it. Multiple voices inside, speaking in rapid Russian. Through the door's window, she could see at least 4 figures hunched over computer terminals, while 2 others stood guard. "General, I've got 6 hostiles in the control room. They're accessing our computer systems." "Phoenix, we've got a problem. Thermal imaging shows the main force is moving toward your location. You've got maybe 3 minutes before you're outnumbered 10 to 1. Elena checked her remaining equipment. 2 more MP devices, 1 fragmentation grenade, and enough ammunition for maybe 30 seconds of sustained fire. Against professional operators, that wouldn't be enough for a conventional assault. But Elena Vasquez had never been a conventional operative. "General, I need you to trust me. In exactly 60 seconds, I want you to restore power to the entire base. All lights, all systems, everything. Phoenix, that will help them see you." Elena smiled as she positioned herself outside the control room door. "Sir, they've been working in the dark for the past hour. Their eyes are adjusted to low light conditions. When those floodlights kick in, they're going to be blind for at least 10 seconds. And 10 seconds is all you need?" Elena's hand found the door handle. 10 seconds is a lifetime, General. Elena had learned long ago that successful operations were about timing, positioning, and understanding your enemy's psychology. The infiltrators in the control room had been working in darkness and emergency lighting for over an hour. Their eyes would be completely adapted to low light conditions. When the hangar's full lighting system activated, they'd experience temporary flash blindness, a physiological response that would give her the tactical advantage she needed. 30 seconds, General, she whispered, pulling the pin on her fragmentation grenade while keeping the spoon depressed. Through the control room window, she could see the leader of the infiltration team standing over a computer terminal, directing 2 subordinates who were frantically downloading data from the aircraft maintenance systems. They'd already cracked the basic security protocols, but the really sensitive information was stored on isolated networks that would take time to access. 15 seconds. Elena took a deep breath and centered herself. In 15 years of covert operations, she'd learned that violence was a tool to be applied with surgical precision. Too little, and you'd fail to achieve your objectives. Too much, and you'd create unnecessary complications. Tonight called for exactly the right amount. 10 seconds. She positioned herself to the left of the door, knowing that most right-handed operators would instinctively turn and fire to their right when surprised. The fragmentation grenade was ready in her left hand, her pistol in her right. 5. 4.3.2. The hangar exploded into brilliant white light as every floodlight, work lamp, and overhead fixture activated simultaneously. Elena heard startled exclamations from inside the control room as 6 figures suddenly found themselves unable to see anything beyond the glare. "Mark!" Elena released the grenade spoon, counted to 2, then kicked open the control room door and rolled the explosive device across the floor toward the computer terminals. The infiltrators were still blinking and stumbling, their hands instinctively moving to shield their eyes from the sudden illumination. She had 3 seconds before the grenade detonated. Elena used them to put 2 round center mass into the closest guard, then dove behind a metal desk as the fragmentation grenade exploded in a shower of sparks and metal fragments. The computer terminals died in cascades of shattered glass and sparking electronics, taking with them whatever data the infiltrators had managed to access. When the smoke cleared, 3 of the 6 operatives were down, either from her gunfire or the grenade's fragmentation. The remaining 3 had taken cover behind overturned furniture and were returning fire with automatic weapons. "Phoenix, this is Control. Multiple hostiles approaching your position from the main hangar floor. You've got maybe 2 minutes before they reach you." Elena popped up long enough to fire 3 quick shots, forcing the remaining infiltrators to keep their heads down. But she could hear the approaching footsteps of their reinforcements, and she was rapidly running out of ammunition. That's when she noticed something that made her smile. Despite the desperate situation, the infiltrators had been so focused on accessing the computer systems that they'd overlooked the control room's primary function. This wasn't just where maintenance data was stored, it was where the hangar's fire suppression system was controlled. Elena's fingers found the fire suppression activation panel, while she kept her pistol trained on the overturned furniture where the remaining hostiles were hiding. The system was designed to flood the entire hangar with fire-retardant foam in case of an aircraft fuel fire. It would also create enough chaos to cover her escape. She activated the system. Alarms began wailing throughout the facility as thousands of gallons of fire-suppressing foam began pouring from ceiling-mounted nozzles. Within seconds, the entire hangar floor was covered in a thick, slippery blanket of white foam that made movement treacherous and visibility nearly impossible. Elena heard cursing in Russian as the infiltrators found themselves slipping and sliding on the foam-covered surfaces. She used the distraction to move toward the control room's emergency exit, a ladder that led up to the hangar's roof access. But as she reached the ladder, one of the infiltrators managed to get a clear shot at her. The bullet caught her in the left shoulder, spinning her around and sending her crashing into the control room wall. Pain shot through her arm, but her tactical training took over. She rolled to the side just as the shooter fired again, the bullet sparking off the concrete where her head had been. Elena's return shot took him center mass, but she could hear more voices approaching through the chaos of the foam-filled hangar. Her left arm was rapidly losing function, and she was down to her last magazine. "Control, I need an extraction route. I'm hit and running low on ammunition." "Phoenix, satellite shows multiple vehicles approaching the base perimeter." These people came prepared for a siege, not a quick grab. "We think they're planning to hold the facility long enough to extract every piece of data they can get." Elena processed this information while applying pressure to her shoulder wound with her good hand. If the infiltrators were planning an extended operation, they'd have backup systems for data extraction. Destroying the control room computers had only slowed them down. "General Morrison, this is Phoenix. I need you to activate the base's self-destruct protocol for all prototype systems." There was a long pause before Morrison's voice returned. "Phoenix, are you asking me to destroy $60 billion worth of aircraft and technology?" "Sir, if they extract that data, they'll be able to build their own versions of everything we've developed. Better to lose the prototypes than to lose our technological advantage entirely." Elena could hear footsteps on the ladder below her as she climbed toward the roof access. The infiltrators had found her escape route and were following her up. "Phoenix, the self-destruct protocol requires 2 senior officers to authorize. I'm 1 vote, but I need someone with equal or higher clearance." Elena reached the roof access hatch and paused, despite the approaching danger. In all her years of covert operations, she'd never revealed her true clearance level to anyone outside of her immediate chain of command. But tonight, with America's air superiority hanging in the balance, she had no choice. "General Morrison, this is Colonel Elena Vasquez, call sign Phoenix, authorization code Delta 77 Whiskey. I am a senior intelligence officer with the authority to make that decision." The silence on the radio was profound. Double quotes, "Colonel, ... You've been working as a janitor for 3 years?" Elena kicked open the roof hatch and pulled herself onto the hangar's flat metal surface, her wounded shoulder screaming in protest. "Deep cover, General. And right now, I'm ordering the destruction of all prototype systems to prevent them from falling into enemy hands." Below her, the first infiltrator reached the top of the ladder. "Authorization confirmed." Morrison's voice was grim but decisive. "All prototype systems will self-destruct in 60 seconds. Elena smiled as she limped across the hangar roof, putting distance between herself and the access hatch. 60 seconds was long enough to get clear of the building, but not long enough for the infiltrators to stop the process once it started. But as she reached the edge of the roof and looked down at the foam-covered chaos below, she realized that her problems were far from over. 3 vehicles had just crashed through the base's perimeter fence, and tactical teams were deploying around the hangar's exits. The extraction phase of the enemy operation had begun, and Elena was trapped on a rooftop with a wounded shoulder and almost no ammunition. That's when she remembered the one advantage she still had. For 3 years, she'd been the invisible janitor who cleaned every building on Blackwater Air Force Base. She knew every maintenance tunnel, every ventilation shaft, and every emergency exit. She knew where the security cameras had blind spots and where the motion sensors could be avoided. Most importantly, she knew about the underground maintenance tunnels that connected all the major buildings, tunnels that the infiltrators couldn't possibly know about because they weren't on any official blueprint. Elena looked back at the hangar as emergency lights began flashing inside, indicating the 30-second warning for the prototype system's self-destruction. Then she began jogging across the roof toward a maintenance shed that concealed an entrance to the tunnel system. The tension is building. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and let me know in the comments which character you're rooting for. Your support helps me create more incredible stories like this one. The maintenance tunnel beneath Blackwater Air Force Base had been designed for utility access, not human habitation. Elena found herself crawling through a space barely 3 feet high, her wounded shoulders scraping against concrete walls while water dripped steadily from overhead pipes. The tunnel was pitch black except for the narrow beam of the tactical flashlight she'd retrieved from her emergency cache. Behind her, she could hear the muffled explosions as the prototype system self-destructed. Each detonation sent a slight tremor through the base's infrastructure, and she hoped the destruction was complete enough to deny the infiltrators access to the technology they'd come to steal. But Elena knew that eliminating the prototypes was only half the battle. The infiltrators' sophisticated operation suggested they had detailed intelligence about Blackwater's layout and security procedures. Someone had been feeding them information from the inside, and until she identified the source of that leak, the base would remain vulnerable. Her earpiece crackled with an encrypted transmission. "Phoenix, this is Control. Satellite thermal imaging shows the main infiltration force has withdrawn to the vehicle staging area. They're not retreating, they're regrouping." Elena paused in the tunnel, pressing her back against the concrete wall while she processed this information. Professional operators didn't abandon an operation just because of unexpected resistance. They adapted their tactics and found alternative approaches to their objectives. "Control, what's the status of base personnel? Are our people safe?" "Most personnel have been evacuated to secure locations, but we've lost contact with the command bunker. General Morrison and his staff were coordinating the response from there when communications went dark." Elena's blood turned cold. The command bunker was the most heavily fortified location on the base, designed to withstand everything from nuclear attack to prolonged siege. If the infiltrators had taken control of it, they'd have access to every classified system on the installation. "Control, I need the building schematics for the command bunker uploaded to my device. And I need you to patch me through to any security cameras that are still operational. Uploading now. Phoenix, you should know the bunker's security system shows that access was granted using General Morrison's biometric signature 23 minutes ago." Elena studied the schematics as they appeared on her tactical display. The command bunker was essentially an underground fortress with multiple layers of security and limited access points. But it also had an older ventilation system that connected to the same utility tunnel she was currently navigating. More importantly, the biometric access information confirmed her worst suspicions. Either General Morrison was the inside source, feeding intelligence to the enemy, or someone had found a way to spoof his security credentials. Elena reached a junction in the tunnel system, where 3 passages met. According to her schematics, the left passage led toward the communications center, the right toward the motor pool, and the center passage connected to the command bunker's ventilation system. She chose the center path. 20 minutes later, Elena was positioned above the command bunker's main operations center, looking down through a ventilation grate at a scene that made her tactical situation clear. General Morrison and 3 members of his staff were zip-tied to chairs around the central conference table, while 6 infiltrators worked at computer terminals throughout the room. But it was the 7th figure that made Elena's heart skip a beat. Colonel James Hartley, the base's deputy commander, was standing freely among the infiltrators, pointing at various displays and speaking in rapid Russian. Elena had interacted with Hartley dozens of times during her cover assignment, and he'd always seemed like a dedicated officer. Now she understood why the infiltrators had such detailed intelligence about Blackwater's operations. Elena activated her micro camera and began recording. Whatever happened next, there needed to be evidence of Hartley's betrayal. The quantum radar prototypes were destroyed, but the engineering data is still accessible through the backup servers, Hartley was saying in accented but fluent Russian. Your technicians will need approximately 30 minutes to extract the complete dataset. One of the infiltrators, apparently the mission commander, responded in the same language. What about the deep cover operative? Our intelligence didn't mention a sleeper agent on the base. Hartley's expression darkened. That wasn't in any of the files I had access to. But whoever she is, she's been thorough. Between the EMP devices and the fire suppression system, she's cost us 2 hours and half our equipment. Elena adjusted her position carefully, trying to get a better view of the computer displays. If the infiltrators were accessing backup servers, there might still be time to prevent the complete theft of America's most advanced fighter technology. That's when the ventilation grate beneath her gave way. Elena crashed down into the operations center in a shower of metal debris and decades-old dust. She rolled with the impact, but her wounded shoulder sent waves of agony through her body as she came to her feet among the startled infiltrators. For a moment, the room was frozen in tableau. Elena standing in the center with her compact pistol raised, the 6 infiltrators reaching for their weapons, and Colonel Hartley staring at her with undisguised shock. Elena Vasquez, Hartley said slowly. Or should I say Colonel Phoenix? Elena kept her weapon trained on the mission commander, while her eyes tracked the positions of the other hostiles. She was outnumbered, wounded, and operating with limited ammunition. But she was also in a room full of sensitive electronic equipment that wouldn't respond well to gunfire. "Hello, Jim," she said calmly. "Enjoying your retirement benefits from the Kremlin?" Hartley laughed bitterly. "You have no idea what you've stumbled into, do you? This isn't about money or ideology. This is about preventing a war that would kill millions of people." Elena's tactical training screamed at her to shoot first and ask questions later, but something in Hartley's tone made her hesitate. In 15 years of operations, she'd learned to distinguish between the desperate lies of caught traitors and the conviction of people who believed they were doing the right thing. "Talk fast, Jim. I've got 6 rifles pointed at me in a very short attention span." Hartley gestured to one of the computer displays, where technical schematics showed aircraft designs Elena had never seen before. The prototypes being tested here aren't just advanced fighters. They're first-strike platforms designed to carry hypersonic nuclear weapons. The technology you just destroyed was going to give America the ability to launch a preemptive nuclear attack that no existing defense system could intercept. Elena's mind raced as she processed this information. If Hartley was telling the truth, the implications were staggering. But she'd seen enough disinformation campaigns to know that the most effective lies were built around kernels of truth. "So you decided to sell out your country to prevent a hypothetical war?" "I decided to level the playing field," Hartley shot back. "If multiple nations have access to this technology, none of them can use it for a first strike without facing immediate retaliation. Mutual deterrence, not unilateral advantage." The mission commander chose that moment to speak up in English. "Enough talking. Kill her and finish the data extraction." Elena smiled grimly. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." She pulled a small device from her belt, the final EMP generator she'd been saving for exactly this situation. This room is full of computer servers containing some of the most sensitive information in the American military. If I activate this device, every piece of electronics in here gets fried, including your extraction equipment. Hartley stepped forward, his hands raised in a calming gesture. Elena, don't be a fool. If you destroy this data, you're guaranteeing that America will have an unstoppable first strike capability. Do you really want that responsibility? Elena looked at General Morrison, who had been silent throughout the exchange. His eyes met hers, and she saw him give an almost imperceptible shake of his head. The general was telling her not to trust Hartley's version of events. Jim, you're assuming I care more about global balance of power than I do about American national security. That's where you're wrong. Elena activated the EMP device. The electromagnetic pulse turned the command bunker into a tomb of dead electronics. Computer screens went black, tactical displays flickered and died, and the constant hum of cooling fans faded into silence. Emergency lighting provided the only illumination, casting everything in that familiar red glow that had become the night's dominant color scheme. Elena kept her pistol trained on the mission commander, while the infiltrators cursed in multiple languages and frantically checked their now useless equipment. The EMP had been devastating in its thoroughness. Every piece of electronics in the room was fried beyond repair. You have no idea what you've done, Hartley said, his voice heavy, with what sounded like genuine anguish. That data could have prevented— Shut up, Jim. Elena was tired of hearing traitors justify their betrayal with claims of higher purpose. She'd heard variations of the same speech from double agents in a dozen different countries. General Morrison cleared his throat, drawing attention to himself despite being zip-tied to his chair. Colonel Vasquez, the servers he's talking about weren't just storage systems. They were connected to our early warning networks. If that EMP propagated through the facility's electrical systems, we may have just blinded our ability to detect incoming threats. Elena felt a chill of uncertainty. Military installations were supposed to have EMP-hardened infrastructure, but older systems weren't always properly shielded. If she'd accidentally disabled critical defense networks, she might have created a vulnerability worse than anything the infiltrators could have accomplished. That's when she noticed that one of the infiltrators was smiling. "What's so funny?" she demanded, shifting her aim toward him. The man responded in heavily accented English. "You think we came here just for data? You think this was a simple espionage operation?" Elena's tactical instincts screamed a warning. Something was very wrong with this entire situation. Professional infiltrators didn't smile when their mission had just been catastrophically compromised. "Control, this is Phoenix," she said into her earpiece. "I need a status report on base." "Defense systems," Static answered her. "Control, do you copy?" More static. The smiling infiltrator pulled out what looked like a standard radio, but Elena could see modifications that suggested much more sophisticated electronics. "Your EMP device worked exactly as we hoped it would. You have just disabled the only systems that could have detected what is coming." Elena's blood turned to ice as understanding crashed over her. This hadn't been a theft operation at all. It had been an elaborate deception designed to trick her into crippling Blackwater's defensive capabilities. "Jim," she said slowly, never taking her eyes off the infiltrators, "what aircraft are scheduled to fly over this base in the next hour?" Hartley's face had gone pale. "There aren't any scheduled flights. We're in a no-fly zone until—" He stopped mid-sentence, his expression shifting to horror as he realized the implications. The mission commander was no longer bothering to hide his satisfaction. At 0347 hours, 3 aircraft departed from international waters and began approaching American airspace. Your defense networks would have detected them 18 minutes ago and scrambled interceptors. But now, with your early warning systems disabled, they will reach their target undetected. Elena checked her watch. 0341 hours. 6 minutes until whatever was coming reached Blackwater Air Force Base. "You son of a bitch," Hartley whispered. "You told me this was about data extraction. You said no one would be hurt." "And no one will be hurt," the commander replied calmly. "The aircraft carry electromagnetic pulse weapons, not conventional explosives. They will render this entire installation permanently inoperable without causing casualties. Your government will lose its most advanced fighter program, but the personnel will survive to serve in other capacities." Elena processed this rapidly. An EMP attack would destroy every piece of electronic equipment on the base, from aircraft computers to medical devices to life support systems. The infiltrators' equipment was probably hardened against electromagnetic interference, which explained why they weren't concerned about her EMP device, but there was something else that didn't make sense. If you're planning an EMP attack, why? Did you need Hartley's intelligence? Why go through the infiltration at all? The commander's smile widened. Because we needed someone to disable the base's EMP-hardened backup systems from the inside. Systems that are designed to automatically restore critical functions after an electromagnetic attack. Elena felt sick as she realized the full scope of the operation. The infiltration hadn't been about stealing technology, it had been about ensuring that an EMP attack would cause permanent damage instead of temporary disruption. "Jim, please tell me you didn't give them access to the backup systems." Hartley couldn't meet her eyes. "They said it was necessary to prevent the first strike. Weapons from being deployed. They said the backup systems would just restore America's ability to launch a preemptive nuclear attack." Elena wanted to shoot him on the spot, but there were more immediate priorities. If the incoming aircraft reached Blackwater with EMP weapons, they'd destroy not just the fighter program, but every piece of electronic infrastructure for hundreds of miles. Hospitals, air traffic control systems, power grids, everything would be fried. "Control, this is Phoenix, emergency override protocol," she said into her dead earpiece, knowing it was futile but needing to try. "We have an incoming EMP attack. Estimated time on target 4 minutes. Nothing but static." Elena looked at the infiltrators who were now making preparations to leave. Their mission was almost complete. They just needed to get clear of the area before their own aircraft arrived. "There's one thing you didn't count on," Elena said. "And what is that?" Elena smiled grimly. "I spent 3 years learning every inch of this base, including the locations of every hardened communication system and backup generator." Before anyone could react, Elena shot out the room's emergency lighting, plunging the command bunker into absolute darkness. In the confusion that followed, she rolled behind the conference table where General Morrison and his staff were restrained. Elena's knife found the zip ties binding Morrison's hands, freeing him with quick, precise cuts. "General, I need you to get to the auxiliary command post in Building 7. If the main systems are down, that's our only chance to contact the outside world. What about you?" Elena was already moving toward the door, using her memorized knowledge of the room's layout to navigate in the darkness. "I'm going to stop those aircraft." She heard gunfire erupting behind her as the infiltrators tried to track her movement in the dark. But Elena was already through the door and racing down the corridor toward the bunker's emergency exit. Behind her, she could hear General Morrison coordinating with his freed staff members to escape through alternative routes. Elena burst out of the command bunker into the pre-dawn darkness of Blackwater Air Force Base. In the distance, she could see the foam-covered hangar where her night had begun, and beyond that, the flight line where dozens of aircraft sat powered down and vulnerable. But Elena wasn't heading for the aircraft. She was running toward the base's most carefully guarded secret, a prototype directed energy weapon system that had been installed for testing but never officially acknowledged. 3 years of emptying trash cans and mopping floors in classified areas had given Elena access to information that wasn't in any official briefing. She knew about the experimental laser defense system hidden beneath the base's radar installation. A system designed to shoot down incoming missiles and aircraft. A system that was powered by its own independent, MP-hardened generator. Elena checked her watch as she sprinted across the base. 0344 hours. 3 minutes until the incoming aircraft reached their target. If she could reach the laser system and figure out how to operate it in 3 minutes, she might be able to save not just Blackwater Air Force Base, but every electronic device for hundreds of miles around it. Behind her, she could hear vehicles starting up as the infiltrators began their extraction. But they weren't her priority anymore. Elena ran toward the radar installation like her life depended on it, because it did. The concealed entrance to the laser defense system was hidden beneath a maintenance shed that Elena had cleaned dozens of times over the past 3 years. Her security access codes, programmed for a deep-cover intelligence operative, worked even after the base's main computer systems had been compromised. Elena descended into a facility that officially didn't exist. The underground chamber housed a directed energy weapon system that represented the cutting edge of American defensive technology. Instead of missiles or bullets, it used concentrated laser beams to destroy incoming threats at the speed of light. The control console was still operational, powered by an independent fusion generator that was immune to electromagnetic interference. Elena's hands flew over the controls, drawing on technical knowledge she'd acquired during 15 years of intelligence work in some of the world's most technologically advanced facilities. System status, operational, the computer announced. In a calm, synthetic voice, no targets currently tracked. Elena checked her watch. 0345 hours. 2 minutes until the incoming aircraft reached weapons range. She activated the facility's detection systems, hoping they were sensitive enough to track aircraft that had evaded conventional radar. 3 contacts appeared on her display, approaching from the northeast at high altitude. The computer began calculating firing solutions automatically. Warning: incoming aircraft detected. Classification: unknown. Estimated time to weapons range: 97 seconds. Elena studied the tactical display, trying to understand the enemy's approach pattern. The 3 aircraft were flying in a tight formation, maintaining perfect spacing for a coordinated EMP attack. They were too high for conventional anti-aircraft weapons and moving too fast for missile interceptors to reach them in time. But the laser system was different. It engaged targets at light speed, with no projectile travel time to calculate. Elena's finger hovered over the firing authorization button as she watched the countdown timer. 73 seconds until the aircraft reached optimal attack position. But something was bothering her about the tactical situation. Why only 3 aircraft? If this was a major strategic operation, why not send a larger force to ensure success? The answer came to her with chilling clarity, because they only needed 1 aircraft to succeed. The other 2 were decoys, designed to split defensive fire and ensure that at least 1 EMP weapon reached its target. Elena modified the firing sequence, programming the laser system to engage all 3 targets simultaneously rather than focusing on one at a time. The computer protested, warning that this would reduce the power available to each beam and might not guarantee kills. "Override accepted," Elena said aloud. "Engage all targets on my command." 53 seconds. Elena activated the facilities communication system, hoping to reach someone who could coordinate additional defensive measures. But the electromagnetic interference from the earlier attacks had disabled most of the base's communication. Networks. 40-1 seconds. The aircraft were now close enough for detailed analysis. Elena's blood ran cold as she read the computer's identification. Russian-built aircraft, heavily modified with stealth technology and carrying what appeared to be next-generation EMP weapons. This wasn't just an attack on Blackwater Air Force Base. This was a field test of Russia's ability to blind American early warning systems and destroy critical infrastructure with electromagnetic weapons. 20-8 seconds. Elena made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Instead of waiting for optimal firing conditions, she activated the laser system early. While the aircraft were still outside their own weapons range, 3 beams of concentrated light lanced upward into the pre-dawn sky, invisible to the naked eye but devastating in their focused energy. The laser system's computer tracked each target automatically, adjusting for wind speed, atmospheric distortion, and the aircraft's evasive maneuvers. The first aircraft exploded in a ball of fire as the laser beam punctured its fuel tanks. The second began spinning out of control as its electronics fried and its engines failed. But the third aircraft managed to release its EMP weapon before the laser could destroy it. Elena watched in horror as a single missile streaked downward toward Blackwater Air Force Base. The electromagnetic pulse weapon would detonate at optimal altitude, sending a devastating wave of electronic destruction across hundreds of square miles. But Elena had one more card to play. The laser system itself was designed to intercept incoming missiles as well as aircraft. Elena locked onto the falling EMP weapon and fired a sustained beam that tracked its descent. For 3 terrifying seconds, she wasn't sure if the laser would have enough power to destroy the missile before it reached detonation altitude. Then the missile exploded harmlessly at 15,000 feet. Its EMP effect dissipated across too wide an area to cause significant damage. Elena slumped against the control console, her wounded shoulder throbbing and her hands shaking from adrenaline. She'd done it. Against impossible odds, using equipment she'd learned about by emptying trash cans and overhearing classified conversations. She'd saved Blackwater Air Force Base and everyone on it. "Phoenix, this is General Morrison, do you copy?" Elena grabbed the facility's communication handset. "General, this is Phoenix. Incoming aircraft neutralized. EMP attack prevented." "Outstanding work, Colonel. We've re-established communication with Regional Command. They're sending a full investigation team to sort out this mess." Elena thought about Colonel Hartley and the infiltration team that was probably still trying to escape from the base. "General, we need to secure the perimeter. The hostiles may still be in the area." "Already handled, Phoenix. We've had the base surrounded by special operations forces for the past hour. Nobody's getting off this installation without our permission." Elena smiled tiredly. "What about Hartley?" "In custody, along with 6 foreign nationals who were found attempting to breach the perimeter fence. Turns out that when you disabled their extraction vehicles with that EMP device, you trapped them on the base." Elena checked her watch. 0354 hours. Less than 4 hours ago, she'd been mopping floors and emptying trash cans, invisible to everyone around her. Now she was sitting in a secret laser facility, having just prevented what could have been the most devastating attack on American soil since Pearl Harbor. "General, I have a recommendation." "Go ahead, Phoenix. The Janitor program worked. We should expand it to other sensitive installations. Sometimes the best way to guard something is to hide your guardians in plain sight." Morrison's laughter carried clearly through the communication system. "Colonel, I think you've earned the right to stop mopping floors. How do you feel about accepting a promotion and running the security for this entire facility?" Elena looked around the laser control room, thinking about 3 years of invisible service and 1 night of very visible heroism. "Can I keep the cleaning cart? I've gotten attached to it." "I'm sure we can arrange that, Phoenix. Welcome back to the visible world." Elena smiled as she began the system shutdown procedures for the laser facility. For the first time in 3 years, she was looking forward to people knowing exactly who she was. The sun was rising over Blackwater Air Force Base as Elena finally emerged from the underground laser facility. The base that had been plunged into chaos and darkness 6 hours earlier was now buzzing with organized activity. Military vehicles moved in coordinated patterns, and she could see soldiers conducting systematic sweeps of every building and perimeter section. Elena's wounded shoulder had been treated by a medic, though she'd refused evacuation to the base. Hospital. There was still too much work to be done, and she wanted to personally oversee the investigation into how the infiltration had been possible. General Morrison met her at the entrance to the radar installation, accompanied by a stern-looking woman in civilian clothes who radiated the unmistakable authority of senior intelligence management. "Colonel Vasquez," Morrison said formally, "I'd like you to meet Director Sarah Chun from the Defense Intelligence Agency. She's here to debrief you on the night's events." Elena shook Chun's hand, noting the woman's firm grip and direct gaze. "Director Chun, I assume you'll want a full report on the infiltration and Colonel Hartley's involvement." "Among other things," Chun replied. "But first, I want to understand how a deep cover operative ended up mopping floors for 3 years, without anyone in my agency knowing about it." Elena glanced at Morrison, who nodded encouragingly. "It was a joint CIA Air Force operation, initiated after we detected unusual activity around several sensitive installations. Someone was conducting very sophisticated reconnaissance of our most classified programs, and we needed an asset who could observe without being observed. And you chose to pose as a janitor?" Elena smiled. "Director, have you ever noticed how invisible service workers are to most people? Politicians, military officers, corporate executives, they'll discuss the most sensitive information in front of cleaning staff because they don't register them as human beings worthy of attention. It's the perfect cover for intelligence gathering." Chun's expression suggested she was reassessing Elena with new respect. "And what did you gather during your 3 years of surveillance?" Elena pulled out the encrypted recording device she'd retrieved from her cleaning cart. "Everything. Every conversation, every meeting, every careless comment made by personnel who thought they were alone, including 17 months of recordings that document Colonel Hartley's gradual recruitment by foreign intelligence services." General Morrison's eyebrows rose. 17 months? You knew Hartley was compromised for over a year? "I suspected, but I needed proof. More importantly, I needed to understand the full scope of the operation. Hartley wasn't working alone, he was part of a network that included personnel at multiple installations. If we'd arrested him immediately, we would have missed the bigger picture." Director Chun accepted the recording device with obvious interest. "How many installations are we talking about?" "At least 6 that I can confirm, possibly more." "The conversations I recorded include references to operations at Edwards Air Force Base, Area 51, the Naval Research Laboratory, and several contractor facilities. This was a comprehensive intelligence gathering operation that had been running for years." Elena watched Chun's expression grow more grim as the implications sank in. This wasn't just about Blackwater Air Force Base, it was about a systematic compromise of America's most sensitive military research and development programs. "Director," Elena continued, "there's something else you need to know. The infiltrators last night weren't just trying to steal technology or plant explosives. They were testing our response capabilities. Everything they did was designed to probe our defenses and identify vulnerabilities." "Explain." Elena gestured toward the hangar where her night had begun. "The cyber attack, the power outage, the infiltration. Itself, it was all calculated to force us to reveal our defensive measures. They wanted to see how we'd respond to a coordinated assault on a sensitive installation." Morrison nodded grimly. "A rehearsal for something bigger." "Exactly. And based on what I overheard during the operation, I believe they're planning similar attacks on multiple installations simultaneously. What happened here was just proof of concept." Director Chun was quiet for a long moment, clearly processing the strategic implications. "Colonel Vasquez, I'm going to need you to come to Washington immediately. There are people who need to hear your assessment firsthand." Elena looked around the base that had been her home for 3 years, thinking about the fellow service members who had treated her as invisible for so long. "Director, with respect, I think I can be more useful here. The people who ignored me for 3 years are going to have to adjust to seeing me as a colleague instead of a janitor. That transition might reveal additional security vulnerabilities." Chun smiled for the first time since Elena had met her. "You want to continue this social experiment. I want to continue protecting this installation, ma'am. Just with a different job description." General Morrison stepped forward. "Director Chun, Colonel Vasquez has earned the right to write her own assignment. If she wants to stay at Blackwater as security chief, I think that's exactly what we should offer her." Elena felt a surge of satisfaction. For 3 years she'd watched this base operate while remaining invisible to its personnel. Now she'd have the authority to implement the security improvements she'd been planning in secret. "There is one condition," Elena said. "Name it," Morrison replied. "I want to keep the janitor position active as a cover. Rotating different operatives through service worker positions could provide ongoing counterintelligence capabilities." The program was more effective than any of us anticipated. Director Chun nodded approvingly. "Consider it approved, Colonel. But I'm curious, after 3 years of being invisible, how does it feel to suddenly be the most visible person on this site?" Elena looked toward the hangar where mechanics were already beginning the process of cleaning up the foam and assessing damage to the aircraft. Several of them waved at her as they worked, a gesture of respect that would have been unthinkable 12 hours earlier. "It feels like coming home, Director. But I learned something important during my time as an invisible guardian. Sometimes the most effective way to protect something is to make sure the threats never see you coming." Chun extended her hand again. "Colonel Vasquez, welcome back to the visible world. I have a feeling you're going to be very busy." Elena shook her hand firmly. "Director, I've been busy for 3 years. The only difference is that now people will notice." As the 3 senior officers walked toward the command building to begin the extensive debriefing process, Elena reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. She'd started the night as Elena Vasquez, invisible janitor. She was ending it as Colonel Phoenix, guardian of one of America's most sensitive military installations. But in many ways, she was still the same person who had been pushing a mop and emptying trash cans with quiet determination. The only difference was that now everyone would understand that her real job had always been protecting them. Elena smiled as she thought about the conversation she'd overheard during her years of invisibility. Tomorrow, those same people would be talking to her with respect due to a senior officer. It would be interesting to see how their perspectives changed when they realized their janitor had been their protector all along. The morning briefing at Blackwater Air Force Base had become a much more sophisticated affair since Colonel Elena Vasquez had taken over as Chief of Security. Instead of the routine security updates that had characterized previous meetings, the daily briefings now included comprehensive threat assessments, counterintelligence updates, and detailed analyses of potential vulnerabilities. Elena stood at the head of the conference table, addressing an audience that included General Morrison, senior staff officers, and the heads of every major department on the base. 6 months earlier, most of these people had never bothered to learn her name. Now they hung on her every word. "The investigation into the Hartley network has yielded significant results," Elena reported, gesturing to a display screen that showed a complex organizational chart. "We've identified 17 compromised personnel across 12 installations, including 3 individuals with access to our most sensitive programs." General Morrison leaned forward. "Any indication of ongoing activity?" "Negative, sir. The arrests appear to have disrupted the entire network. However, we're maintaining enhanced surveillance protocols at all affected installations." Elena advanced to the next slide. More importantly, the Janitor program has been expanded to 15 additional facilities. We now have deep cover operatives in service positions at every major research and development installation in the country. Major Williams, the base communications officer, raised his hand. Colonel, how do we ensure that our own people don't compromise operational security by treating service workers as invisible? Elena smiled. It was a question she'd been expecting. Excellent point, Major. We've instituted mandatory security awareness training that specifically addresses the tendency to ignore support personnel. Additionally, we're conducting regular exercises where service workers are actually intelligence operatives, testing our personnel's adherence to security protocols. Lieutenant Colonel Jackson, who had been the officer responsible for base security before Elena's promotion, looked uncomfortable. Colonel, some of the personnel are concerned about being constantly watched and evaluated. It's affecting morale. I understand that concern, Elena replied diplomatically. But I'd rather have personnel who are conscious of security protocols than personnel who are comfortable enough to discuss classified information in front of anyone they consider invisible. The exercises have already identified 3 potential security violations that we were able to address through additional training rather than disciplinary action. Elena advanced to her final slide, which showed a photograph of the underground laser facility. Finally, I'm pleased to report that the directed energy defense system has been officially acknowledged and is being integrated into our standard defensive protocols. The success of the system during the infiltration has led to approval for similar installations at 7 additional facilities. General Morrison stood up. Outstanding work, Colonel. Your recommendations have been forwarded to the Joint Chiefs, and I expect we'll be seeing significant changes in how the military approaches facility security across all branches. As the meeting concluded and the officers began filing out, Elena noticed that several of them stopped to speak with her personally, a level of professional interaction that would have been unthinkable during her years as a janitor. But she also noticed something else, a service worker who was emptying trash cans in the corner of the room. Elena approached the woman, who looked up with the same neutral, apologetic expression that Elena had perfected during her own years of invisible service. "Good morning," Elena said. "I'm Colonel Vasquez, the security chief. I don't think we've been introduced." The woman's eyes widened slightly. "Oh, Colonel, I'm sorry. I'm Maria Santos. I hope I wasn't disturbing your meeting." Elena smiled warmly. "Not at all, Maria. Actually, I was wondering if you'd noticed anything unusual during your work here. Any conversations or activities that seemed out of place." Maria glanced around nervously, clearly uncertain about whether she should be talking to such a senior officer. "Well, Colonel, there was something yesterday. 2 of the maintenance supervisors were discussing some kind of delivery that was supposed to arrive after hours. They seemed concerned about keeping it quiet." Elena felt the familiar surge of professional interest. Even 6 months after her dramatic emergence from deep cover, the base still held secrets that were only visible to the people everyone else ignored. "Maria, would you be willing to provide more details about that conversation? And about anything else you might have observed that seemed unusual?" "Of course, Colonel. But ... is this normal? I mean, should I be reporting things like this?" Elena put a reassuring hand on the woman's shoulder. "Maria, you see more of what really happens on this base than most of the officers realize. Your observations are valuable, and I want you to know that you can always bring concerns directly to me." As Elena walked back to her office, she reflected on how much had changed since that chaotic night 6 months earlier. She'd gone from being invisible to being one of the most visible people on the base. But more importantly, she'd helped change how the military thought about security, surveillance, and the value of the people who worked in the shadows. Elena's office was located in the same building where she'd once cleaned floors and emptied trash cans. But now the space was equipped with multiple secure communication systems, classified computers, and displays showing real-time security status for the entire installation. Her desk held a small plaque that had been a gift from General Morrison, Guardian Angel. Next to it was a photograph of her old cleaning cart, which now occupied a place of honor in the base museum as part of an exhibit on innovative security techniques. Elena settled into her chair and began reviewing the morning intelligence reports. The world was still full of threats, and America's military installations still needed protection. But now that protection came from Guardians who understood that the most effective security often came from the most unexpected places. As she worked, Elena could hear the sound of a vacuum cleaner in the hallway outside her office. She smiled, knowing that the person operating that machine might be exactly what they appeared to be, or might be America's next invisible guardian, watching and protecting from the shadows. Either way, Elena felt confident that Blackwater Air Force Base was in good hands. The janitor they had ignored for 3 years had taught them all a valuable lesson. Never underestimate the people who are invisible in plain sight. Sometimes they're the ones standing between you and disaster, armed with nothing more than a mop, a bucket, and the determination to keep you safe. Elena picked up her secure phone to call Director Chin with the latest intelligence update. After all, being visible had its advantages too, especially when you needed to coordinate the protection of an entire nation. The base was secure. The threats had been neutralized, and America's most sensitive military secrets remained safe. It had been a good night's work, even if it had taken 6 months to fully appreciate the results. Elena Vasquez, the janitor who had saved a military base, was now Colonel Phoenix, guardian of America's technological edge. And she was exactly where she belonged. What did you think of this thrilling journey? Share your favorite moment in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss our latest tailies. What kind of story would you like to hear next? Let me know in the comments. This story follows the complete journey of Elena Vasquez, from invisible janitor revealed hero, incorporating elements of military thriller, espionage, and personal transformation. The narrative maintains constant tension while exploring themes of invisibility, service, and the hidden guardians who protect society from the shadows.